That's not mine. How's everybody this afternoon? So this event is always an inspiring experience for me because, I look out into the crowd and I feel the energy, I feel the motivation, the determination, and I see the greatness. And that blows back on me and helps me feel a little better about myself. So thank you guys for that, and I'm happy to be here. Before I get started, I just want to acknowledge Evangeline Mitchell. I don't think she's in the room, but I want to acknowledge her because she has put on these events for probably about 15 years now. I think this is the 5th year of this particular one, but she has others she's been doing much longer. And she's committed to increasing diversity in legal education and in the ranks of attorneys. And she's specifically committed to increasing the enrollment of Black and Latino students in the nation's law schools, and of course, eventually in the ranks of the nation's lawyers. And so she's done more than most in this realm, and so she deserves acknowledgement for that. So let's give her a clap in her absence, and maybe somebody will tell her about it. All right, so 21 years ago, when I suspect most of you guys were in diapers or probably not even born yet, I started first year orientation at Howard University School of Law. Oh, I like that. All right, and that first day of orientation, the dean stood in front of my classmates and me, and she welcomed us with the following statement. She said, "A lawyer is either a social engineer or a parasite on society." Those words are iconic at Howard. They are drilled into the minds of every student who passes through the hallways of the law school, and for most of us, they inform the manner in which we see ourselves as lawyers in the role that we play, particularly Black lawyers. A lawyer either is actively working to make society a better place, a more equitable place, a fairer place, or they're sitting back and just enjoying the benefits, reaping the benefits of the efforts of others. And the latter is unacceptable given the great privilege it is to be a lawyer in this country, to whom much is given, much should be expected. So those words were made famous by a man named Charles Hamilton Houston. How many of you are familiar with Charles Hamilton Houston, his life, his work? All right, that's a good number. If you're not familiar with him, I implore you to learn as much about him as you can, as soon as you can. He is nothing short of a superhero. He is often called the man who killed Jim Crow. Of course, Jim Crow is the colloquial name for the destructive systems of racial segregation that were designed, implemented, and enforced for the sole purpose of keeping Black people in states of second-class citizenship post-slavery. He's called the man who killed Jim Crow because he was the chief architect of the legal strategy that culminated in the Brown v. Board of Education decision in 1954, when the U.S. Supreme Court deemed unanimously state-imposed racial segregation in public schools to be unconstitutional. Now, Brown is significant because it not only ended state-imposed segregation in our public schools, but it also hastened the end of this form of segregation throughout American society. I'm old enough to have parents who grew up in segregated neighborhoods, attended segregated schools. I'm old enough to have grandparents and great-grandparents, most of whom I was fortunate enough to know, who spent most of their lives in segregated societies. And so we have people like Charles Hamilton Houston and others, names you probably recognize, names you probably never heard of, to thank for the rights and privileges that we enjoy today and that we're fortunate enough to take for granted. The entire underlying notion of segregation, this whole idea of separate but equal, was never about equality. It was about dampening and limiting the hopes, the dreams, the aspirations, and the literal physical movement of Black people. That was the entire premise of it. And it's important that we know that. So to end that was a major step forward in American society. And it also inspired other movements in other places, throughout the continent of Africa especially. So Charles Hamilton Houston served as Dean of Howard Law from 1930 until 1935, and he is credited with bringing the law school into the modern age, if you will. Howard was founded in 1867, both the law school and the university, and for the first 60, almost 70 years of the law school's existence, it was a part-time night program only. When Dean Houston took over, he started the full-time program, and that was based on the idea that if you wanted to develop an acute legal mind, if you wanted to become a master legal practitioner, that was a full-time endeavor. But one of his most impressive feats, in my mind, is he led the effort for Howard to receive accreditation from the American Bar Association in 1931. That's impressive because at the time, the ABA wasn't even allowing black lawyers to be members of the association. They wouldn't do that until 12 years later in 1943. So Howard received ABA accreditation in 31 as an all-black school, 12 years before black lawyers were even allowed to join the ABA. No easy feat. At Howard, Dean Houston also trained some of the most impressive civil rights lawyers and some of the best legal minds to ever walk the face of the earth. And I mean that so literally. Most prominently, Thurgood Marshall, who went on to argue Brown v. Board of Education before the Supreme Court, and who went on to become the first black justice on that court. A lawyer is either a social engineer or a parasite on society. You don't have to attend Howard Law School for those words to resonate. In fact, I hope each of you internalize those words and use them as a source of motivation, a source of inspiration, because as we all should know, there's a whole lot of work to be done. There's a whole lot of engineering, good engineering, to be done to ensure that this country lives up to the lofty ideals and principles that are laid out in the Constitution. Now, before I sit, I want to tell you a little bit about the organization that I'm lucky enough and privileged enough to work for. We're called Access Lex Institute, and we're a nonprofit association with the sole goal of making legal education better. I serve as executive director of the Center for Legal Education Excellence, and we're working on 3 objectives that are very relevant to you all as aspiring lawyers. The first objective is we want to ensure that by 2025, every law school in the country has a first-time bar passage rate of at least 70%. Right now, in any given year, you will have about 55 to 60 law schools out of roughly 200 that fall below that threshold. So we want to bring up those 55 to 60 to ensure that no matter where you go to school, the prospects of you passing the bar on the first time are much more likely than not. The second objective we have is we want, by 2025, for law school graduating classes nationwide to reflect the diversity of the country as a whole. So to give you an idea of what that objective looks like, that would mean about 1,000 more black students in first-year classes nationwide across the country each year. The third objective is we want to increase financial literacy among law students. The vast majority of law students are taking on immense levels of debt, 6 figures for most, to fund their legal education. And most of them are seeking entry into a profession where the ability to safeguard their own money and property as well as the money and property of others is a requirement of admission to the bar. Yeah, the bar examiners check your credit before they say whether you can become a lawyer or not. One of the main ways we're doing that is through a program called Max by Access Lex, and it's a financial education curriculum designed specifically for law students at each level of their enrollment. So we have a 1L program, a 2L program, and we'll roll out our 3L program next year. Right now, there are 140 law schools that have adopted Max. So as you're considering law schools and as you're finding out more information, ask the law school if they're a Max school. And Max not only talks about, student loans and things of that nature, but it also teaches you concepts around making budgets that are realistic and having a discipline to stick to them, how to calculate interest on loans, so on and so forth. Again, this is the kind of financial literacy that we should be getting in grade school, but that the vast majority of us don't. So those are our three main objectives. Like I said, we want to make legal education better for you guys. And we're not just blowing smoke. We're putting our money where our mouths are. We're investing more than $150 million between now and 2025 to live out and to achieve these goals. And so every day when I wake up, I'm usually sleepy because I'm not a morning person. But I try to remember that the work I'm doing is not just for me to have somewhere to live and have a car. I don't have a car, but you get my point. It's to make the world better. It's to be a social engineer. So with that, you guys have a full 2 days. I won't talk any longer, but I do want to give you my email address just in case anybody wants to contact me and, if there's something I can do for you, need some advice, I don't know. But my email is ataylor@accesslex, that's lex.org. Taylor, ATAYLOR, @accesslex.org. All right, and with that, I'm done. Thank you.